The story begins with an exhausted man desperately calling out to his friends, questioning if the dungeon they were attempting wasn't proving to be too difficult. One of his companions shouted back that guild reinforcements were on their way, they just needed to hold on a little longer. Yet, a pervasive dread hung in the air, a certainty that at this rate, everyone was doomed to die. Suddenly, a new figure appeared, a book held firmly in his hand, and he calmly instructed everyone to step back. All eyes turned to see who it was. Immediately, a barrage of spears rained down upon the monstrous foe. Someone with a phone strapped to his forehead, apparently live-streaming the event, exclaimed, "Yeah, it really is him, man." He then asked the person recording if they could clearly see the Hunter of Hunters, the legendary Shinbei, now standing before them. Meanwhile, someone watching this livestream on their phone questioned the whole Hunter of Hunters title. To him, it made no sense, especially since this legendary figure couldn't even bother to attend his own son's graduation. As if on cue, the viewer observed a young man cursing vehemently in the background, deducing that this frustrated youth was probably Shinbei's son. A friend approached the young man, Cyan, asking why he was alone. Cyan, looking awkward, simply replied that his family was busy. His friends then asked him to take a picture, and he helped them, all while thinking to himself that it was always like this, his dad was perpetually busy. Upon arriving home, Cyan found his mother looking tired. She was meticulously caring for his sister, Son, who had been in a coma for 12 years. His mother was performing leg movements, likely to keep her muscles flexible, just in case she awoke. Cyan asked his mother why she hadn't attended his graduation, and she simply replied that he should already know why. Angrily, he raised his voice, demanding peace and questioning why she couldn't spare just one day. He felt as though everyone around him cared only for his sister. But then, a voice from behind him sharply cut through his complaints, stating that he was yelling too much. Cyan turned to see his formidable father, Shinbei, the renowned Hunter of Hunters. Cyan was about to ask how his father had arrived so quickly, but Shinbei merely reiterated that he had already told him not to raise his voice in the house. At that, Cyan's demeanor changed, and he turned to smile, asking his father where he was going. When Cyan stated he was headed to the training hall, Shinbei bluntly told him he had said it countless times, with the talents Cyan possessed, it was impossible for him to become a hunter. It would be far better if he just gave up on that dream already. Predictably, this only fueled Cyan's determination, making him even more motivated to train. During his training session, his coach, Truda, remarked that Cyan was more intense than usual that day. The two were locked in a shoulder-to-shoulder struggle until Cyan's opponent, Juwon, made a move, forcing Cyan to retreat. Cyan attempted a power move, unleashing his chains, but Juwon, who seemed to possess no power at all, effortlessly countered. Cyan's attack aimed at Juwon, wrapping around his sword, but in a mere second, Juwon destroyed everything. Poor Cyan lay on the ground, completely baffled by what had just happened. Juwon still mocked him, saying that the attack might have worked this time if his chains weren't so weak, suggesting that Cyan might fight better if he didn't try to rely solely on that power. Later, at a restaurant, Truda offered to pay for the meal since Cyan had been beaten so badly. However, Cyan retorted that there was no point in Truda trying to pay for anyone when he himself was broke. All Cyan wanted was to keep training. Juwon asked why he wished to train even more, reminding him that the Hunter Academy test was already over, and they simply had to await the results. But Cyan vehemently shouted, "No!" Most of the competitors had multiple abilities, or were regressors. He continued, yelling that with his garbage abilities, it was impossible for him to become a hunter, and if he wanted his father to acknowledge him, he couldn't just sit at home resting. Juwon observed him, concluding that all this merely proved Cyan should give up. Juwon had already noticed that Cyan didn't even seem comfortable in his own house, warning that at this rate, Cyan would have nowhere to return to when things got tough outside. Under the pouring rain, a reporter delivered a speech, stating it had been 100 years since monsters first appeared, and decades since those disgusting creatures began disguising themselves as humans. They claimed to be regressors who belonged in this world, but the reporter insisted that was merely talk to fool everyone. He declared that this world was not their home, and it would be better if all those weirdos returned to the hell from which they came. As the reporter spoke, Cyan stood there, his phone ringing. The message containing the results of the Hunter Academy test had arrived, and predictably, Cyan had not passed. He then began yelling, asserting that the place he lived in was already a hell. 10 seconds later, he stood defeated in the rain, on the ground. His phone rang again. It was his mom calling. He answered somewhat awkwardly, asking what she wanted. In the next scene, Cyan arrived home, looking scared. The doctor remarked on the incredible fact that someone who had been in a coma for 12 years could wake up in such relatively good condition. Cyan's mother, tears streaming down her face, turned to him and told him to say hello to his sister. It seemed likely that this sister, after her 12-year coma, would wake up with the most overpowered ability in the world, further infuriating Cyan. Sometime later, his mother explained that Son was feeling anxious, so they would need to stay close to her often to help her adjust. She asked Cyan to take shifts, but he replied that he had a lot to do, and graduating didn't mean he had endless free time. His mother insisted it was his sister, but Cyan shouted back that he didn't even remember ever talking to her. He seemed like a jerk, unwilling to help his own sister. His father told him to watch what he was saying, but Cyan argued back that Shin-Bake was the one who needed to watch his words, claiming he didn't deserve all this arguing. Son, hearing their conflict, said she didn't like it and began to cry. His mother rushed to comfort the girl, leaving Cyan standing there like an idiot after his outburst. Following this incident, Cyan began spending at least 3 full days at the hospital with Son. He realized his mother wanted them to grow closer, but the way Son sometimes glanced sideways at him suggested he wasn't truly invested in the idea. Outside the hospital, he was still training with his tired chains, determined, even after his rejection from the academy, knowing that this training might make no difference. Then, at one point, he entered Son's room to find her bed empty. Outside, he found Son sitting on a bench. He called out to her, startled and yelling, asking what she was doing there and telling her she couldn't just disappear. Son, a bit embarrassed, apologized, explaining she felt suffocated inside and asked if she could stay outside for a little while. Cyan seemed bothered but said it was okay. He sat beside her, preoccupied with his phone. Suddenly, Son asked if he hated her. Cyan was taken aback, asking why. She replied that he seemed scary, more like their father now, and used to be cuter. Cyan explained that the last time they spoke, he was 5 years old and didn't even remember what he was like back then. Son said she didn't really remember either. Their mom and dad were older, and the siblings had changed completely. For some reason, she felt like she was alone in this world because she couldn't even go to school. Cyan, in his heart, also felt alone after all. He then dismissed her worries, asking what nonsense she was saying. She had him, their mother, and their father, so how could she be alone? Moreover, she could always make new friends. Just because she couldn't go to school didn't mean she would be alone forever. This interaction made Cyan realize that attending the Hunter Academy wasn't the only path to becoming a hunter. After all, his coach, Truda, had never gone to the academy. It was still far too early for him to give up. Son then thanked him and suggested they return inside. Cyan, however, asked how she had even gotten down there, noting the absence of a wheelchair and the fact her muscles should be completely atrophied. But then, he saw her floating. It was obvious at this point. He demanded to know what was happening, and Son simply replied that the entire time she was asleep, she had been living in the fairy realm. Cyan stood there, mouth agape, remembering the reporter who claimed that those who returned from another world were demons, and his father's words that with Cyan's talent, he would never become a hunter. Seeing Son floating calmly and glowing, Cyan was utterly shocked. A flashback began, revealing if young Son had been strong in the past. Their mother had shown up at school, where the 2 children were covered in dirt. They complained playfully, promising to play more and come back home tomorrow. However, tomorrow was uncharted territory for anyone. Back at home, they bathed, ate dinner, and went to sleep. Son lay down, wondering what she would do the next day. It was at that moment that a strange blue fairy appeared, telling her she had been chosen to go to their world and asking if she was interested in saving that place. After that, Son spent about 6 months in that other world, but when she returned, she discovered that 12 years had passed in her own world. Now, back in the hospital, Shin-Bake stated he was sure his daughter was a returnee. He believed the bracelet on her arm was some kind of awakened ability, but noted it didn't work on those who brought powers from another world. He then asked Son to describe the place she had visited. She explained that the fairy had taught her what she could and couldn't do, how to use magic, the knowledge needed to survive, and how to face the queen. Shinbei seemed a bit confused, telling her to elaborate on this queen. Son said this queen was a bad person in that world, and there was a promise that if she could defeat her, she could return to this world. Shinbei asked if she had come back after killing the queen, and Son loudly replied no, she had managed to resolve the conflict through discussion and hadn't learned any dangerous magic. Shinbei, however, countered that none of that mattered. The power of returnees was always dangerous because most gained enough strength to save another world. That alone was enough for him to be certain that the power she received exceeded that of an S-rank hunter. Lastly, he noted it was common for a returnee's abilities to differ from the ones they had in the other world, which was why relatives needed to monitor her closely and prevent her from using her abilities, no matter what. He warned that the hunter's office would contact her tomorrow. Standing by the door, Cyan overheard everything and quietly walked away. Cyan recalled his hunter test results, which stated his physical skills were good enough for a hunter, but his ability was useless in battle against monsters because his chain's durability was worse than a regular chain, hence his F rank. He had Walmart chains instead of Kurapika's badass ones. Then, Son approached him, looking awkward, and asked if he wasn't surprised, adding that he didn't have to be scared, and that nothing had changed from the past. But Cyan just told her to get lost. The poor girl visibly recoiled and said she'd rather be alone. Cyan, however, continued to shout at her, telling her to disappear. With that, she got up and left, leaving Cyan alone on the street again. Suddenly, Cyan stopped, asking himself what he was doing and why he was so pathetic. Amidst these questions, he noticed people gathering and wondered why. In the middle of the crowd stood his father, Shinbei, all bloody, holding a dead man by the arm. Everyone was asking if the man was truly dead. Now, even Shinbei noticed Cyan watching everything. The future Mr. Beast had been caught. Shinbei asked Cyan why he was there and where Son was. Cyan, looking awkward, asked if he couldn't even go out for a walk. Shinbei stared at him, questioning if it was the first time he had seen a dead body. Cyan replied yes, and Shinbei then stated that the mortality rate in the hunter industry last year was 4 out of 10. Out of 10 people, 2 suffered extremely serious injuries. Normally, those who survived were traumatized and often pretended to be hunters, a pattern that held for life, with no exceptions for rookies or veterans. Cyan had to understand that this was the kind of world he lived in. Shinbei wanted to know if Cyan was truly confident and wanted to survive in such a world. Out of nowhere, Cyan, completely freaked out and fearing his father, said no. Shinbei simply placed a hand on Cyan, stating he was sure his son couldn't handle it. The family seemed cursed. Standing outside the hospital, looking in, Cyan reflected that it had always been like this. He genuinely felt he had no ability, and he was trying to deny reality or reject his own weakness. He remembered watching his father with all those hunters, probably all dead now, and no longer knew what he wanted to do. At that moment, as he questioned if becoming a hunter was truly what he desired, he saw his sister flying. He approached, uneasy, and quickly noticed she was covered in blood. She must have gotten it from their father. He told her to come down, asking if she was hurt and what had happened. Son then snapped out of it, remembering the man who said her abilities could be dangerous. She began repeating for him not to come closer, while Cyan understood nothing. Then, she remembered the guy she had blown up with her arrow shot, told Cyan to stay away, and suddenly, a light exploded in the middle of the forest. Sometime later, Cyan was knocked into a tree, completely wrecked. In the midst of the chaos, Son was surrounded by a purple aura, and someone was shouting that a person was destroying buildings. She was crying hysterically, while Cyan desperately asked if she had lost her mind and what had happened. The poor girl repeated to herself that she wanted to stop this, but at the same time, said she didn't want to stop, completely losing control. She told him to get away. Trees were being cut down, slashes firing everywhere. Now Cyan understood why that reporter said these returnees came from hell, they truly did. The worst part was that Cyan knew using powers indiscriminately in the street would lead to her execution. What was he going to do? He could try to stop her, or alert their dad, but the police would arrive much faster than he could. That's when he thought of something, asking himself if there was nothing he could do. But looking at himself, he knew he didn't stand a chance against her. The best thing he could do was run. In the end, none of this was his fault. But suddenly, he seemed to see a small child staring at him while his sister continued her rampage, crying that she didn't want to do this. When Son opened her eyes, she saw Cyan running toward her with his tired chains, dodging everything, yelling, asking if she could hear him and telling her to calm down. At that moment, Cyan remembered what his father had said about the hunter mortality rate. He wasn't even officially a hunter yet and was already risking his life. But at the same time, he concluded that risking one's life was precisely what a hunter did. He then yelled, telling her she needed to calm down and break free from that confusion. Son began to wonder why he was going so far for her. She wasn't the same person he used to know. The fairy suddenly took Son's hand and asked what the problem was, reminding her that she was the heroine who had saved their world. But Son answered no, explaining that in that other world, she was only physically an adult, she had no friends and was dangerous. She had barely arrived and already killed a bunch of people, and everyone hated her. The fairy, however, countered that wasn't true. At the very least, she had never seen anyone risk their own life to save someone they hated. Cyan's chain drew close, and in the next scene, Son, holding Cyan in her arms, was crying. The problem was, the police were already surrounding the place, so things wouldn't go smoothly for him. Cyan, in his mind, saw himself as a happy little kid, and thought that at least he had managed to do that much. Another person appeared, asking his friend if she had seen what that kid did. The incident was handled by the police, who ensured nothing reached the news. But the obvious result was that Son ended up in jail. The guard showed up, announcing that visiting hours had started. As she was led down the hallway, Son remembered how much her mother had cried as soon as she found out Son would be arrested. The guard opened the door, and Son expected to see her mother, but there stood her father, Shin-baek. She sat there, slumped, trying to explain things, but he interrupted, stating he was there to get her out. The woman with glasses who had spoken with her possessed the power to read people's memories. She had seen in the memories that Son was attacked first and had used her power in self-defense. By law, that act of using force was justified, so Son couldn't be imprisoned for it. Since Son was only familiar with the fairy world, she didn't understand any of this justified action or use of force legal jargon. But her father explained it simply, it meant she was not guilty, and that was why she would be released. Awkwardly, she tried to confess she had killed someone, but Shin-baek stated the person she had shot hadn't died. There were many users who could recover from any kind of wound, so he was probably fine by now. Healers in this world seemed quite powerful. Son was simply crying, saying she felt relieved. Shin-baek said nothing. Then, the glasses woman asked if they were done talking. Shin-baek, now outside, replied, yeah. The woman then explained that they couldn't pay the hospital bill, and he would definitely face punishment for that. Shin-baek replied that it was all good, stating he was already relieved that it would end like this. The woman told him not to worry, since everyone there owed something to the great hunter Shin-baek. She then inquired why he was so certain the person Son attacked must have died. Shin-baek said that perhaps when Son learned the truth, she would be more emotionally stable. The woman agreed that made sense and handed over a document, telling him to take it. He read the document intended for his daughter, then suddenly frowned and asked who sent it. Apparently, the foreigner, the man from earlier, must have been the one who sent this mess. Meanwhile, Cyan, not even fully recovered, was already back at his practice. His main talent seemed to be throwing a chain that could catch a can. He stood before a man who didn't seem very impressed. Cyan wanted to know who that crazy dude was, and Truda, his coach, replied he didn't know either. The man said not to worry too much about him and to keep doing whatever they were doing. Cyan, however, retorted that he couldn't focus with a damn commentator beside him talking trash. The man, in turn, asked if it was truly because of him. Was Cyan going to claim he couldn't focus in a real fight because of something so trivial? That kind of triviality would definitely happen in a dungeon, and if he couldn't concentrate just because someone was eating chips next to him, it already showed he wasn't ready. Cyan then stepped forward and asked if the old man knew him, clearly looking for a fight. Cyan was about to talk about how much he had practiced, but the man simply got up and said he didn't care. He acknowledged that Cyan genuinely had good physical ability, but his proficiency was terrible.
Cyan didn't even notice that in 1 second, the man was already behind him.
The man stated that the chains Cyan created with his own energy were awful, as he was forced to keep consuming energy just to control them. Not to mention, he used too much power with each action, and they weren't precise at all.
Cyan needed to understand that professionals didn't even use much power.
The man grabbed a bag of chips and declared, "This is how it's done." With one strike, all the cans were pierced. He asked if Cyan understood, and Cyan was utterly shocked. The craziest thing was that the bag of chips, which had been wrapped in his energy, was still intact. While Truda wondered who this guy was, the man walked over to Cyan and said that not even Cyan knew his true power. Then, he pulled out a scroll, explaining it was a tool that summoned returnees, and asked Cyan to bring it closer to his chain. The second Cyan touched it, the item vanished, and the man said he now understood. He recalled what had happened in the hospital, stating he had clearly seen that the moment Cyan's chains touched his sister, her powers were completely extinguished.
In other words, Cyan possessed the never-before-seen talent to seal the powers of returnees.
Trying to use those chains as a weapon was the true definition of wasted talent.
Confused, Cyan asked how he knew all this and who he was.
The man introduced himself as Jae-young, a professional hunter and a professor at the Special Abilities Academy.
He was there to recruit Cyan.
Cyan was totally frozen, stating he had already failed the admission test. Jae-young said not to worry about that, he had the authority to enroll any student there, and Cyan's ability was good enough.
But, of course, the final decision was Cyan's. Would he want to join the academy or not? Cyan suddenly adopted a bewildered expression, almost crying, saying, "What is this?" Jae-young laughed and welcomed him to the Hunter Academy. But suddenly, something came flying toward Jae-young. He turned and managed to catch it mid-air. It was a piece of paper.
And here came Shin-baek, visibly pissed off and radiating aura, demanding that Jae-young explain what he was planning.
Jae-young turned and retorted that Shin-baek should be asking himself that. While Shin-baek fumed, Cyan didn't understand anything that was going on.
Jae-young, face to face with Shin-baek, simply remarked that the more he saw Shin-baek, the more he realized he was getting old and wrinkled, suggesting he should start attending meetings before people forgot what he looked like. Shin-baek, however, told him to stop changing the subject and answer what the paper was. Jae-young said it was obvious, he had simply sent the children a little recommendation letter.
Son was a returnee with an S-rank ability, and Cyan had an unprecedented ability.
Shin-baek, though, declared he wouldn't accept that for either of them. Even though Son had an adult body, she had only spent 6 months in the other world, so she still had the mindset of a child and couldn't go to an academy like that. Jae-young, however, insisted she needed to adapt, pointing out that Shin-baek himself always said that. Besides, Son's powers seemed to be going out of control. Without knowing how to use her powers, she was basically a bomb, and the only chance was to train with experts at the school. But Shin-baek stated that he alone was already enough to train her. Shin-baek then glanced to the side and said that, besides Son, Cyan had no talent. He told Cyan he needed to understand that determination without strength only led to death.
Cyan seemed to swing from emotional to decisive very quickly.
But Jae-young then countered that Shin-baek was wrong. He had seen with his own eyes that Cyan was brave and had thrown himself in to save his sister. He possessed the bravery needed to become a hunter. Shin-baek replied that wasn't courage, it was recklessness. He turned to Cyan and asked if, at that moment, Cyan knew what his sister's ability was, and if he really thought he could stop her power. Cyan, looking uncomfortable, tried to explain that he was just afraid she'd get hurt, but his father cut him off.
Shin-baek declared that was the problem. Cyan wasn't focused on the outcome.
The only reason Cyan was still alive now was because he got lucky. His ability had worked this time, but was he going to live as a hunter who gambled with luck every time? Jae-young was trying to recommend Cyan, but that letter wouldn't grant him any special treatment. In the end, he would just get crushed by the competition at that academy. Shin-baek certainly didn't help, putting his son down like that. As the two men argued, Cyan asked why his father always did this. Why not even once did he have the guts to say he had done a good job? He wasn't even praised for saving his sister, something that should have been obvious. He was almost going crazy when suddenly, someone grabbed his arm. It was Ju-ong, who praised Cyan, saying that now that a teacher had recognized him, he was closer to his dream. Cyan looked awkward, mumbling it wasn't really like that, but Juong told him not to overthink it. All he needed to do was follow the path he believed was right. Looking at the chains in Cyan's hand, Juong said he trusted the work Cyan had shown, and then, directly to Shin-Baek, stated that Cyan shouldn't care about people who didn't acknowledge him, especially someone who knew nothing about him. It seemed Juong and Shin-Baek didn't get along either. Shin-Baek then stated he now understood why Cyan was so obsessed with becoming a hunter. It must have been Juong, the idiot, who gave him this false hope. Shin-Baek's aura made Juong start sweating coldly, but Cyan slapped himself in the face, mentally thanking his teacher for helping him clear his head. He then declared that at first, he truly just wanted to be like his dad. He wanted to be acknowledged and prove that he could win. He had only thought about such pathetic things. But that day in the hospital, things were completely different. Now, he was ready. He was going to become a hunter, even if it meant having to fight against his own father. But Shin-Baek turned and stated he knew words alone weren't enough for Cyan to understand things. He placed a hand on Cyan's shoulder, leaned in close to his ear, and told him to go ahead and try. Cyan flinched. Shin-Baek continued, saying that soon enough, Cyan would realize he wasn't born to walk the path he was trying to follow. Shin-Baek would give him 1 year to enter the student council. If he couldn't even do that, he would be forcibly brought back home. Jaeyoung tried to interject, but Shin-Baek simply told him to shut up and warned Cyan that he had better protect his sister. Her powers weren't stable at all, and like it or not, the only option was to send Cyan along. He had better make sure Son lived peacefully at school, and just like the first condition, if anything happened, Cyan would be brought back immediately. He asked if Cyan understood, and of course, Cyan said yes, listening to his father. With that, Shin-Baek released him and walked away. The three remaining, Jaeyoung, Juong, and Cyan, stood there looking foolish, saying they really thought they were going to die. Out on the street, Jaeyoung called out to Shin-Baek, asking if he hadn't gone too far, demanding that Cyan make it into the student council. Jaeyoung knew that only the strongest could get into that position, and for Cyan, an F-rank first-year student, it would be impossible. Shin-Baek, however, retorted that if Cyan had the courage to say to his face that he was going to become a hunter, that was the least he should be able to do. Jaeyoung kept insisting, and Shin-Baek then admitted he never wanted to drag anyone down this path, but remembering that Cyan said he wanted to be like him, Shin-Baek turned and said that in the end, he ended up dragging him along anyway. Back at the hospital, Son looked at the admission letter, clearly happy with it. The month of February came to an end, and Cyan was seen practicing with his tired chains. March arrived with a sudden change. The boat for the students of the Hunter Academy was now departing. The scene then shifts abruptly, as if transitioning to the next chapter of a story. In a dream, someone thought to himself that he must be lying, that people were still there, but the whole place was burning down. It looked like Shin-Baek's hand had killed everyone, and the dreamer yelled, "A hunter shouldn't act like that." Suddenly, he woke up in bed. He had white hair. This was not Cyan. The one with glasses asked if he was okay, as it looked like he was yelling in his dream. The white-haired man said yes, and the glasses-wearing man replied that he must be the new student since it was the first time he had seen him there. The one with glasses introduced himself as Purium, a second-year student, and the white-haired man shook his hand, introducing himself as Seal Sabine. On the boat, Cyan and Son were looking at a box full of supplies, wondering why they were receiving so much. It was Cyan's suitcase, and it seemed he had stolen a bunch of stuff from his dad. Suddenly, Son got up and said she was going to look around. Cyan told her not to go alone, but she assured him she would call if anything happened, adding she knew their room was 105. Cyan realized he was acting like a parent. He looked out the window, thinking that the important thing was to know what they were going to do for their mom. Meanwhile, a blonde guy on deck was announcing that this new school life would be full of encounters, and he needed to make friends with strong people to make life easier. But Purium, the one with glasses, seemed to think this was just what a beginner would consider, implying Woojuan, the blonde guy, wasn't entirely sane. His two companions tried to figure out what this crazy guy was talking about. Woojuan returned to his normal self, saying that getting close to other students was good, but next time, it would be better to bring along a really pretty girl his age. Purium apologized, explaining that this crazy guy Woojuan is kind of a girl addict. Woojuan, annoyed, complained he had been looking all over and hadn't seen anyone, but then he saw Son feeding birds. She looked sad because the birds weren't taking her chips when suddenly she dropped the bag. At the same second, Woojuan appeared, picked it up, and handed it back. Son cutely thanked him, but Woojuan, still not quite right in the head, immediately said that she couldn't attract any birds, but she managed to attract someone else. Son looked confused, while her friend wondered if it was okay to let this lunatic keep acting like that. Purium replied that since she wasn't running away, it was a revolution. Many people there had participated before, but the only downside was the crazy expensive fee. Subin remarked it made sense to pay, as whoever graduated from there wouldn't need to worry about work ever again. But remembering that hunter who had burned everything in his dream, Subin added that not everyone deserved that qualification. Purium glanced over, wondering where Woojuan was going with the girl. He suggested they follow, since Woojuan wasn't entirely sane. And so, they followed. In the next scene, inside a room, Son brought Woojuan to meet Cyan, or rather, to report him. She immediately told Cyan to forget it, claiming Woojuan had been following her, asking if she had a boyfriend, and even touched her. From outside, Woojuan's friends saw him getting kicked out of the room. Woojuan told Cyan they could talk a bit, but Cyan already started to beat him up. Purium came to help, while Sabine simply sat there, wondering what had happened. It seemed that in the next scene, Cyan explained that Son had been asleep for 12 years. The other guys then started apologizing to Son, saying they hadn't known about that. Cyan said it was okay and apologized for hitting them out of nowhere. Then Purium told Cyan that he and Sabine must be the same age. Sabine greeted Cyan, who, being handsome, didn't really care to return the greeting. A while later, outside, Purium asked if Cyan was in the hunter department, and he said yes. Purium wanted to know if there was any hunter Cyan was a fan of or particularly liked. Cyan replied that personally, no, but his father was a hunter, so he was a bit influenced. Purium then remembered Cyan's name, Jai Cyan, and asked if he happened to know Shinbake. As expected, Subine's eyes widened. He remembered the bastard. The moment Cyan said, "Yeah, that's my dad," Subine froze while the others were shocked, asking if Cyan was lying and expressing their fan admiration. But Sabine remembered very well who Jai Shinbake was, and now he just sat there, unable to process it. Right in front of him was the son of that person. Purium stated that Shinbake was a role model for him when he was younger, and he had dreamed of becoming a hunter, always looking up to him for inspiration. Cyan asked if Purium no longer wanted to be a hunter, and Purium explained that he was now in the magic engineering department because he didn't have the talent to be a hunter, as he was rank E. Cyan mused internally that he was F rank. At that exact moment, Son blurted out Cyan's F rank, startling the three of them. Cyan looked awkward, and Purium wanted to know how Cyan had become a hunter and got admitted if he was F rank. Son quickly interjected before Cyan could say anything, explaining that they were admitted through a recommendation. Cyan rubbed his head, swaying slightly. Then, he called out to Purium, suggesting that if he trained hard, he might also end up becoming a hunter like him, or at least manage to get into the department to take the tests. Subine, clearly, must have been thinking that Cyan was just a spoiled kid who was there because of his dad. The trip continued with Purium teaching Son how to play on the Nintendo Switch, Woojuan attempting to flirt with girls, and Cyan pacing back and forth. That's when Cyan saw Woojuan at the edge of the boat and went over to ask if he was feeling seasick. Woojuan replied yes, and Cyan stopped next to him. Then, Subine asked why Cyan wanted to become a hunter. Cyan began to say something about his dad, but Subine interrupted, stating that wasn't what he was asking. He wanted to know Cyan's beliefs, his mindset. Subine seemed to be trying to coach and change Cyan. Cyan remembered that moment when he saw himself as a child but admitted he wasn't sure, he hadn't thought that deeply about it. Subine then stated that when one watched the news, they saw all kinds of people who became hunters without the right motivation, those who just wanted to make easy money or become famous. Cyan agreed there were such people. Subine continued, saying that those people didn't understand that becoming a hunter didn't just bring perks, it also brought responsibilities, which was why he hated such hunters. Confused, Cyan asked why, then, Subine wanted to become one. Subine replied that he wanted to be someone who could save everyone, and that was why he wanted to tell Cyan not to go to the academy. Cyan paused for a moment and asked what Subine was talking about. Subin explained that it was ridiculous that Cyan had told Purium he could become a hunter even as rank E. The moment a person awakened, their rank was set and never changed. Besides, getting into this academy was insanely expensive unless one had connections or a rich dad to pay for everything. Little did he know that Cyan's dad wasn't exactly supportive. Cyan immediately told him to be careful with his words, adding that he was there because he had awakened his powers after a lot of training. Subin replied that awakening powers had nothing to do with hard work. If Cyan awakened a power he didn't have before, it just meant he didn't know what it did or didn't realize he had it. All that happened was that by luck, he ended up using it. The fact that he got a recommendation to get into this place even as rank F, and even the fact that Subin himself was there, was all because they were lucky. Saying he would become a hunter without recognizing something so obvious simply showed how immature he was, and that mentally, he was at the same level as his sister. Clearly, Cyan immediately went in to land a punch. It looked like it was going to hit Subin straight in the face, but something happened right there. Subin remained standing, untouched. Worse, Son was startled, and when she looked to the side, Cyan was on the ground. She asked what happened, and Subin calmly stated Cyan had tripped out of nowhere, but he was fine. Cyan had no idea what had happened. Right at the moment his punch was about to land on Subin's face, the trajectory changed, and he ended up on the floor. Subin then turned to Cyan and remarked that someone like him, who couldn't control himself and just went around punching, would only stain the hunter's reputation. Subin turned away, saying that if Cyan had any brains, he'd just give up. But then, something grabbed Subin's foot. It was Cyan's porcelain chain again. Son was startled, and now Subin was the one on the floor. Cyan then declared that maybe, yes, he ended up in this place out of sheer luck, but there was no way in hell he was going to give up by choice. Subin stated Cyan could stay there as long as he wanted, but with that rank, he wasn't going to survive. Cyan simply replied, "Then I want to see that at midnight." He was calling Subin for a midnight meetup, like a romantic duel. Sometime later, it started pouring rain, and Son remembered the fairy saying she didn't want to disappear. She suddenly woke up and found herself alone in the room. She got up, called for Cyan, but noticed he wasn't there. So, she wandered into the hallway, wondering where he went, dying of fear. Out of nowhere, she was startled by Woojuan, who was right behind her, asking what she was doing there. She asked him the same thing, and he said they were going through some stuff in a room and invited her to come along. She happily agreed, completely forgetting about Cyan. Arriving at the room, there was a small group laughing. As soon as Woojuan saw the orange-haired girl, Yuni, his friend, he suddenly became awkward and told Yuni he was leaving. Yuni asked why, and he said she hadn't mentioned that girl, Son, was going to be there.